My parents looked me in the eyes at Christmas dinner, smiled, and told me the family property was being taken care of. What they didn't tell me was that 3 weeks earlier, they had already signed it away. All of it. The land my grandfather built with his bare hands. The house I grew up in. The one thing he ever said was mine. Gone. And they thought I'd never find out. But here's the thing about paper trails, they don't lie. And I had one piece of paper they forgot about completely. This is what happened when I decided to stop being the good child, and start being the one who reads the fine print. My grandfather, my mom's dad, came to this country with almost nothing. Built a business. Bought land. Eventually owned a property that, by the time I was born, was worth something real. He was old school. Didn't trust banks much. Definitely didn't trust solicitors. But he understood one thing, he wanted his grandchildren taken care of. So when I was around 10 years old, he sat my parents down and made one thing very clear. The land, and the house on it, was to go to me and my brother when the time came. He didn't put it in a will at first, he put it in a letter of wishes. Handwritten. Signed. And witnessed by 2 neighbors. He told my parents, when I'm gone, you make sure those kids get what's theirs. He passed away when I was 19. And for a few years, everything seemed fine. The property sat in my parents' names. It had always been in their names technically, because my grandfather had transferred it to them years earlier for tax reasons. But the understanding was crystal clear. Or so I thought. Fast forward to my late 20s. I'm living abroad, working, building my own life. My brother's in another city. Neither of us are asking questions about the property because, why would we? It's family. You trust family. And then one day, completely by accident, I get a notification. I'd signed up for one of those property alert services, you know the ones, where you register a property address and they email you if anything changes on the land registry or public records. I'd set it up years ago for a completely different reason and honestly forgotten about it. The email said, a transaction has been recorded at this address. I remember staring at my phone for a full minute thinking I'd misread it. I hadn't. I pulled up the land registry records. In the UK this is public, anyone can check who owns a property for a small fee. In Canada and many US states, deed transfers are also public record, searchable online or at the county recorder's office. The transfer had gone through 6 weeks earlier. My parents had sold the property, the whole thing, to a developer. A company I'd never heard of. And the sale price was significant. We're talking a number that would have changed my life and my brother's life, split between us. They said nothing. Not a word. My brother didn't know either. I called him the moment I confirmed what I was seeing and he thought I was joking. He actually laughed. Then he went quiet. Now here's where a lot of people in this situation make the mistake that costs them everything. They confront the family immediately, emotionally, without documentation, without advice, without understanding what their actual position is. I almost did that. I was shaking. I was furious. I typed out a text to my mom that I'm genuinely glad I never sent. Instead, I waited 48 hours. And I used those 48 hours to find the paper. See, I knew about the letter of wishes my grandfather had written. I'd actually been handed a copy when I was around 21. He'd made copies. He'd given one to my parents, kept one himself, and given one to me directly, just in case, he said. I remember thinking it was a bit dramatic at the time. I dug through every box and folder in my flat until I found it. It was there. Slightly yellowed. His handwriting, unmistakably his. Witnessed. Dated. Signed. It wasn't a will. It wasn't a deed. But it was something. Now I want to pause here and be really clear, because this is where the video gets genuinely useful for anyone watching who might be in a similar situation. A letter of wishes is not automatically legally binding in the way a will is. In England and Wales, in most Canadian provinces, and in most U.S. states, a letter of wishes is generally considered a moral document, not an enforceable contract. On its own, it doesn't give you a legal right to property. But, and this is a significant but, it becomes legally relevant in several scenarios. Scenario 1, Proprietary estoppel. This is a legal doctrine used in UK courts, and similar principles exist in Canada and the US, that essentially says, if someone made you a clear promise about property, you relied on that promise, and then the promise was broken to your detriment, a court can order a remedy. My grandfather had made a clear promise. I had it in writing. I had acted in ways consistent with believing that promise, including certain financial decisions I'd made over the years on the assumption that I had an inheritance coming. Scenario 2, Constructive trust. In some cases, courts have found that even when property is legally in one person's name, if there was a shared understanding that another person had a beneficial interest, that person may have a claim. This is more complex, but it's been argued successfully. Scenario 3, Misrepresentation or breach of fiduciary duty. If your parents were acting as executors or administrators of an estate, or if there was a formal trust involved anywhere in the chain, selling assets that were meant for beneficiaries without disclosure can constitute a legal breach. I spoke to a solicitor. In the UK we use that term, in the US and Canada you'd say attorney or lawyer. I want to be clear, I'm not a legal professional, and nothing in this video is legal advice. What I'm sharing is my experience and what I learned. Your situation will be different and you absolutely need to speak to a qualified professional. My solicitor's assessment after reviewing the letter and the timeline was, you have something here. This isn't nothing. Those words were everything. Armed with legal advice, documentation, and a clearer head, I called my parents. Not to scream. Not to accuse. I called and I said, very calmly, that I knew about the sale, that I had some questions, and that I thought it would be good for all of us to talk before things became complicated. The silence on the other end of that call was one of the longest of my life. My mom's first response was, the property was in our names. We had every right. My dad was quieter. I think he knew. I said, I have Granddad's letter. And I've spoken to a solicitor. Another silence. What came out over the next hour was a mixture of rationalizations, partial truths, and things that were genuinely painful to hear. They'd had debts they hadn't told us about. They'd been approached by the developer and the offer felt like a lifeline. They told themselves they'd sort us out later with what was left. There wasn't much left. There never is when people make financial decisions from panic. Did I believe they were evil? No. Did I believe what they did was right? Absolutely not. They had taken something that was not only promised to me and my brother, it was promised to us by a man they both loved. And they did it without a conversation. Without transparency. Without giving us any chance to be part of that decision. And then they sat across from me at Christmas and smiled. That part I'll carry for a long time. My solicitor sent a formal letter, what's called a letter before action in the UK, outlining our position, referencing the letter of wishes, the doctrine of proprietary estoppel, and requesting mediation before any court proceedings were initiated. Developers and sellers in property transactions do not want legal clouds hanging over a completed sale. It creates title insurance issues, it creates headaches for everyone involved, and sometimes it can even affect whether a development gets planning permission if there are disputed ownership claims being actively litigated. The developer's solicitors got involved quickly. My parents, facing real legal exposure, agreed to mediation. We did not get the full sale value. That ship had sailed on the legal path to recovering all of it would have been expensive, lengthy, and uncertain. My solicitor was honest with me about that. What we got, me and my brother together, was a negotiated settlement. A sum that acknowledged what had happened and that gave both of us something meaningful. Something that mattered. Not justice in the perfect sense, but recognition and closure. I signed the settlement agreement on a Tuesday afternoon in a boring conference room with bad coffee. And I thought about my grandfather the entire time. Oh, what do I want you to take from this? A few things. First, keep your documents. Letters of wishes, promises in writing, emails, texts where inheritance or property is discussed, keep them all. Organize them. Tell someone where they are. My grandfather's old-fashioned instinct to make copies and hand one to me directly is the single reason this story ended the way it did. Second, property records are public. In the UK you can search the land registry. In Canada, each province has its own land registry system. Ontario, BC, Alberta all have online search tools. In the US, county recorder or assessor offices hold deed records. Most are searchable online. You can set up alerts. Do it for any property you have an interest in. Third, don't confront before you're ready. Emotional confrontations without documentation or legal grounding usually hurt the person with less power in the situation. That was me. Get advice first. Collect your information. Then have the conversation. Fourth, letters of wishes and informal promises are not worthless. They may not be a will, but depending on your jurisdiction and your circumstances, they can be part of a legal argument. Proprietary estoppel is real. Constructive trusts are real. Talk to a professional. And fifth, maybe the hardest one, sometimes the people who hurt you aren't monsters. They're just people who made terrible choices under pressure and convinced themselves it would all work out. Understanding that doesn't mean accepting it. It doesn't mean you don't fight for what's yours. It just means you can do it without letting the anger eat you alive. I'm still in contact with my parents. It's different now. It will always be different. But I chose not to let this be the thing that ends the relationship entirely, not because what they did was okay, but because I decided I get to make that choice for myself. My grandfather wanted his family taken care of. In the end, imperfectly, messily, after far too much stress, I think that's what happened. If this video helped you or made you think about your own situation differently, please share it. This stuff happens more than anyone talks about, and the more people know their options, the better. Drop your questions or your own story in the comments, I read every one. And I'll see you in the next one.